They say the desert remembers. It remembers who crossed it with reverence, and who tried to tame it with arrogance. Somewhere between the Devil's Saddle and Dustbone Ridge, nestled like a secret in the folds of red stone and scorched scrub, there stood a crooked little outpost run by a woman who never said more than needed. Mave Collie didn't have the look of a storybook hero. Gray streaks in her sunburnt hair, creases carved deep by sun and sorrow, and eyes like old tin, dull until danger shone on them. Folks said she'd once been married to a trail guide who could read the stars like scripture, but he vanished in a blizzard a decade back. Some claimed he froze beside his horse, trying to save a family in the Bitterroot Pass. Others whispered he'd just walked out one night. Maeve never corrected either tale. She stayed, tending the water pump, watching for storms, mending fences that the wind tore down as fast as she built them. Her only companion was a rangy chestnut stallion named Whistler, a gift from her husband before the mountain swallowed him. The horse was nimble, intelligent, and fast, faster than anyone had a right to expect from an animal raised on dust and cactus. Every spring, Calico Drift held its canyon sweep. The town turned from grit and spit to color and commotion. Children tied ribbons to fence posts. Traders arrived with carts full of dried peaches and frontier lace, and every able-bodied fool who fancied himself a horseman registered for the race. It wasn't just a tradition. It was a statement. The winner earned not only silver coins, but local glory that clung like burrs. Maeve had never entered before. When she arrived to register, the clerk didn't look up. "Name of the rider?" he asked. She tapped a book with a leathered finger. "You'll spell it right." The room went quiet. The clerk blinked once, then scribbled her name. "You're riding?" She nodded. No smile. No explanation. The morning of the race dawned under a sky bleached white with heat. Riders lined up like soldiers, dust coiling around the hooves of snorting Mustangs and sleek Arabians. Betting men squinted down the line, ignoring the weathered woman in a patched duster and her unremarkable horse. But Whistler's ears twitched with attention, his body lean and coiled, as if he understood the stakes. The starting pistol cracked like thunder. Hooves pounded the hardpack. Dust surged skyward in violent spirals. Whistler did not bolt. Maeve held him tight for the first mile, letting the younger riders exhaust themselves in the stampede. She knew this land, every sloping ridge and hidden gully, and more than that, she knew patience. At the halfway point, the leader, a cocky rancher's son named Clayton Griggs, turned a grin at the crowd watching from the hilltop. He didn't see Maeve pass him like wind threading a canyon crack. Whistler's hooves barely touched the earth. By the time she crossed the finish line, the cheers were stunned silent. A few hands clapped, then more. Someone hooped. By sundown, the whole town was retelling the race with louder colors and bolder strokes. That night, Maeve drank water from a tin cup and sat near the edge of the saloon porch while the celebration roared behind her. Griggs nursed a bruised ego in the corner, and strangers drank deep and bragged louder, their voices slick with whiskey and curiosity. She was tightening Whistler's bridle when she felt the air change. A group of men stepped off the main road. Their boots were clean, clothes neat, as if the dust knew better than to cling to them. One wore a hat low over his eyes. Another carried gloves he didn't need. None looked surprised to be there. They walked into the saloon like it was theirs. Maeve didn't follow, but she watched. From where she stood, she saw the way they moved, not with swagger, but with purpose. And when the tall one asked the bartender a question, the whole room stilled. His lips barely moved. The bartender glanced her way. Whistler snorted and stomped once, nervous. Maeve turned in early. She didn't lock the stable gate. Hadn't done so in years, but she tied the latch twice, a habit she hadn't practiced since her husband rode off into snow. Morning came late and hot. The sky bore no clouds, only the shimmer of heat off stone. But the stable was silent. The gate stood open. The tracks were plain, a set of boot prints, deliberate and deep. The latch lay broken on the ground. Whistler's stall was empty. Maeve didn't make a sound. She didn't call his name. Instead, she walked into her cabin, pulled a canvas roll from beneath her bed, and unwrapped her husband's old saddlebag. Inside it, a pair of worn gloves, a flask of stale bourbon, and a revolver, oiled and waiting. She saddled a borrowed mule from the water station. Townsfolk watched her with murmurs thick as summer flies. "You gonna tell the marshal?" someone asked. She paused, then shook her head. "They're heading north," came another voice. "A boy, barely 10. I saw him ride into Rattlesnake Gorge at first light." Maeve tipped her hat, offered no thanks, and started up the ridge trail. The sun rose behind her, casting a long shadow of woman and mule against the canyon's burning face. Behind her, the town whispered. Ahead, the desert remembered. And somewhere beyond the ridges, her horse waited. Rattlesnake Gorge was no place for mercy. The ridgelines twisted like the spines of sleeping giants, and the paths wound narrow and treacherous, flanked by shale walls scorched red by time. In the gorge, the wind never blew steady. It curled in on itself, whispering things a person ought not listen to. Maeve knew these canyons the way a widow knows silence, intimately and without affection. She rode the borrowed mule carefully, her legs stiff from disuse. The animal was steady, not swift, but she didn't need speed now. She needed quiet. The tracks were still fresh, boots and hooves, cutting west toward Black Lantern, Washington. For riders, she guessed. Maybe 5. Whistler's prints were lighter, deliberate. Even frightened, he moved with grace. By noon, the sun turned merciless. Maeve took shelter beneath an overhang, poured the last of her water into a tin lid, and offered it to the mule. She drank none herself. While the animal rested, she scanned the cliff walls, fingers brushing the old revolver at her hip. The weapon wasn't flashy, no engravings or ivory grip, just walnut stock and iron that smelled of oil and ghosts. A flutter of movement on the ridge caught her eye. Not an animal. A man. Watching. Maeve didn't reach for the gun. Instead, she raised one hand in greeting, 2 fingers open, palm out. The man came down slow, careful not to dislodge loose stones. He was tall and rangy, with a scatter of silver in his beard and a limp that dragged from his left knee. His rifle stayed slung across his back, but his eyes were sharp. "Didn't expect to see a soul up here," he said. Maeve nodded once. "Didn't expect to be seen." "Fair. You chasing those riders?" "I am." He spat into the dust. "Jonas Riggs' crew. Call themselves the Lantern Men now. Ride at night. Take what's fast and kill what ain't. You sure you want any part of that?" "I'm not after them," she said. "Just the horse." The man studied her. That stallion with the flame-white face. She gave no answer, but he must have read it plain. "I knew your husband," he added. "Rory Collie. Guided us out of Yuba Pass in '68. You patched my shoulder when it got torn by that cougar." Her gaze narrowed. "Bullard." He grinned crooked. "Didn't think you'd remember. I was younger then. And louder." "Still loud," she muttered. Bullard squatted on a flat rock, sighing like his bones resented every motion. "They've been stashing horses in Black Lantern, Washington. There's a trailhead, about 2 miles up with cairns stacked to throw off scouts. Clever, but careless." "You seen Whistler?" "I seen a horse too proud for that company yet. Looked like he knew he was stolen." He scratched his chin. "You're not going to ask for help?" "No. You'll take it if it comes?" "Maybe." He nodded, as if that settled it. "I'll mark the trail on your map. If you don't have one, take mine. I'm too old for that kind of canyon now." Maeve accepted the parchment, unfolded it, and scanned the terrain lines drawn in a soldier's hand. Exact, sparse, unforgiving. Before she left, Bullard said one more thing. "You ain't the first one Jonas Riggs stole from, but you might be the first one he regrets." Maeve rode until the canyon turned shadowed and narrow. The walls loomed close, the air heavy with the copper stink of sun-baked stone. The mule balked at a turn, nostrils flaring. Maeve dismounted, tied the reins to a scrub tree, and moved forward on foot. She found the first sign near a dried creek, blood smeared on a flat rock, dark and old. Nearby, a scrap of leather hung from a thorn bush. Whistler's bridle. Torn. Her jaw tightened. A cough startled her. She swung the revolver around, steady. Behind a boulder, half buried in dust and cactus, lay a boy. 16, maybe 17. dressed in travel-worn clothes and cradling his arm like it might break off. "Don't shoot," he rasped. "Who are you?" "Lantern crew." Not anymore." "Your name?" "Eddie." He swallowed hard. "They left me. Said I wasn't tough enough. Got thrown trying to break the stallion. Damn thing near trampled me." Maeve stepped closer. The boy's arm was crooked, likely broken. She crouched, opened her saddlebag, and wrapped a length of cloth around a splint she fashioned from mesquite. She worked in silence, fast and efficient. "You ain't gonna kill me?" he asked. "I only shoot what deserves it." Eddie stared. "You're Collie's widow. I heard him say. Rig knows who you are. Said he's seen you once before." "When?" "Years ago. Said you and your man rode with the 6th Cavalry. Said Rory froze, 'cause Rig's orders were to leave the slow behind." Maeve's hand stopped. Her voice came low. "And Rig followed those orders?" Eddie looked away. He laughed when he said it. She stood. "Where are they now?" "Black Lantern, Washington. They don't call it that just 'cause of the cliffs. They hang lanterns at night to fake their numbers, trick folks into thinking the canyon's full of riders. They're stockpiling horses, planning to raid trading posts all the way to New Mexico. Your stallion's too wild to ride, so they're waiting him out." She gave the boy a canteen and pointed back toward Bullard's camp. "Go. You'll live if you're smart." He limped off without thanks. Maeve climbed a narrow incline overlooking the basin below. As the sun bled toward the horizon, the canyon lit with flickering lights. Lanterns strung from trees, wagons, poles, dozens, maybe more. Shadows moved among them, but from this distance, it was impossible to count how many men there really were. Then she saw him. Whistler, tied near the edge of a campfire's glow, nostrils flared, body tense. He was flanked by 2 guards, rifles slung loose, playing cards. She watched until the wind chilled. Her fingers brushed the revolver, but she made no move yet. She would not charge him blind. Not yet. Instead, she studied. She waited. The desert was her ally, and she was not a woman who rushed justice. Night fell slow, like a curtain drawn by careful hands. Down in the canyon basin, lanterns swayed in artificial rhythm, meant to deceive any wanderer into thinking the valley was crawling with outlaws. From Maeve's perch on the ridge, the lights flickered like fireflies caught in spider silk, pretty, but telling. She moved after midnight. The wind had stilled, and the stars hung like stones above her. She slipped from rock to rock, boots silent, revolver tucked beneath her duster. The pistol felt heavier tonight, not from the weight of steel, but the years it hadn't been used. Below, the camp settled into drunken laziness. Fires burned low. Guards slouched. Cards were dropped for flasks, and talk turned into laughter that edged toward sleep. Maeve timed her descent with care. The dust muffled her steps, and the ravine's natural cuts offered concealment. She didn't need to get all the way to Whistler, not yet. She just needed to get close enough. She found a vantage point above the horses. They were tied to a length of iron cable strung between 2 wagons, most of them dozing, a few alert with ears twitching. Whistler stood apart, untamed, tense, his rope pulled taut from repeated lunges. Even tied, he looked defiant. Then a voice broke the quiet. "You always had quiet feet." Maeve turned. Jonas Rigg stood 10 paces behind her, rifle lowered, not aimed, but not idle. He was broader than she remembered, face lined, eyes meaner than war or age alone could make them. He wore a tan hat, clean like his coat, with a dark ring where sweat had dried 100 times over. "I figured you'd come," he said. "That stallion's the last thing of his you've got left, ain't it?" Maeve didn't blink. "That's not why I came." Rigg chuckled, shaking his head. "Always straight to it. You still carry his gun." Her hand rested near the revolver, but she didn't draw. "What do you want?" "I want to talk," he said. "You're not dumb enough to shoot me here. My men would turn this gorge red in your name." She took a step closer. "You remember Bitterroot Pass?" Rigg's mouth curled. "I remember it snowed. And I remember the order. Leave the stragglers. Save the rest. Your husband was a good man, but he wasn't the right one to follow. I made a decision. You know how that goes." "I know cowards don't call it that." You want revenge, he said. It's honest. But is it smart? Maeve raised her chin. You stole my horse. He smiled, but it faltered. This about a horse? No, she said. It's about the kind of man who thinks he can take anything. Even time. He leveled the rifle. Then I guess we're done talking. The shot that rang out wasn't hers. It came from the ridge. Riggs' rifle flew from his hands as a bullet smashed the stock apart. He staggered, and before he could recover, Maeve had her revolver drawn and cocked. From the shadows above, Bullard appeared, a rifle slung with familiar ease. You really think I was just going to hand her a map and sit out the fireworks? He called. Maeve didn't look away from Rigg. How many men in your camp? Enough to burn you both down. Rigg growled. No, Bullard said, stepping down the incline. More lanterns than men. I counted. Clever illusion, though. You were bluffing the wrong people. Maeve advanced, slow and steady. You left my husband to die. Then you lived like that meant something righteous. I saved the company, Rigg snapped. You saved your command, she said, and buried your honor in snow. Behind her, the horses stirred. One of Rigg's men shouted, a confused echo. A shot cracked, but not at her. Bullard returned fire with precision. Screams followed. The camp exploded into chaos. Maeve lunged forward. Rigg swung at her, catching her shoulder with a wild elbow. She stumbled but didn't fall. His knife appeared from his coat, gleaming under starlight. I should have killed you back then, he snarled. You did, she said. Then she fired. One shot, right beneath the sternum. Rigg dropped like stone into dust. Maeve stood above him, chest heaving. The camp roared with confusion, men shouting, horses shrieking. Bullard had taken cover, trading fire with half-awake outlaws. Whistler reared, snapping the rope free from the stake, with a scream like thunder. Maeve turned and ran for him, ducking past a wagon just as bullets hissed overhead. Whistler bolted but paused when he saw her. Even in the firelight, he knew. She grabbed his mane and swung into the saddle, bareback. Bullard, she shouted. I'm right behind you, he called, limping fast. She guided Whistler with knees alone, weaving through the camp as gunfire sparked and yells thickened the air. She passed one man reaching for a shotgun. Whistler kicked, sent him sprawling. Another tried to block the path, but Maeve's revolver barked twice, and the man dove aside. Bullard scrambled into a secondary saddle, strapped to a mule left near the edge. Maeve met him at the canyon's mouth. Together, they rode hard, dust whipping up behind them, silhouettes vanishing into the dark. They didn't stop until dawn spilled across the high ridge. Both were silent for a long time. The canyon behind them was quiet again, no pursuit, no echoes. Just the wind rising with the sun. Maeve finally spoke. You shouldn't have followed me. Bullard wiped sweat from his brow. You'd have done the same. Not for you, she muttered, but her eyes softened. He chuckled. Fair enough. They dismounted near a dry stream, where cottonwoods stretched like prayer hands. Maeve rubbed Whistler's neck, feeling the heat and tremble in his muscles. He leaned into her touch. You ever think you'd ride again? Bullard asked. I never stopped, she said. I just didn't move. Bullard's eyes narrowed. What now? Rigg's men will scatter, maybe regroup. He had a bounty on his head in 3 territories, you know. Some will blame you. Others might thank you. Maeve shrugged. They'll talk either way. He looked at her, voice gentler. You killed the man who took your husband's name and dignity. She met his gaze. No, I killed the man who thought the desert forgot. Behind them, the wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of ash and old iron. Justice, after all, had its own way of riding home. They came back the long way, through dry riverbeds and sun-cracked gulches, where lizards fled the tread of hooves and vultures circled high with lazy patience. The desert stretched wide and cruel, but Maeve rode like she'd never left it. Bullard followed at a slower pace, cursing the ache in his knee, but he never asked to stop. Neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. News outran them. By the time they reached the edge of Rustwood, whispers were already circling through the saloon doors and trade stalls. That the lantern men had fallen. That Jonas Rigg was dead. that a woman dressed in dust and fire had come down from the canyon and split the night open with justice in her hand. The folk didn't recognize her at first. Time and grief had carved Maeve into something leaner, harder. But Whistler, with his pale face and wild gait, was unmistakable. And when she rode him down Main Street, hat low, revolver on her hip, blood on her coat, but none of it hers, folks stepped back like the law itself had taken horseflesh. The sheriff met her outside the general store, thumb hooked behind his belt buckle. He wasn't a brave man, but he was a curious one. "You bring trouble with you?" he asked. Maeve dismounted, boots hitting the ground with a thud that settled like truth. "I buried trouble in the gorge," she said. A few of his boys scattered. "They won't regroup." The sheriff scratched his jaw. "That true what they're saying? That you killed Jonas Rigg?" "I gave him a chance to speak," she replied. "He used it poorly." Bullard leaned against a hitching post nearby. "We left markers. Bodies to be found. If you're looking for claims." The sheriff nodded, eyes wary. "You'll stay the night?" Maeve met his gaze. "No. I just came to return what was stolen." She turned, walked Whistler toward the edge of town, where the old stables sat half abandoned. There, she found the caretaker, an old ranch hand with bad knees and a soft way with animals. She handed him the reins. "He's free now," she said. "Keep him if he'll let you, or let him run." The man blinked. "He's yours, ma'am." Maeve looked away. "Not anymore. He belonged to someone good. I just brought him home." Bullard caught up to her as she walked out onto the flatland, where the earth met the sky in a quiet handshake. "You're leaving," he said, not as a question. "I came for a reckoning," Maeve replied. "Not a place to stay." "You got no one waiting." She shook her head. "I did once. He waits nowhere now." Bullard sighed. "You know, folks'll remember this. Some'll call it vengeance. Others'll say it was justice." She looked toward the horizon. "Let them. Either way, it'll become story soon enough." And so it did. The tale grew with each retelling. Some said she was a ghost of the frontier, born of smoke and thunder. Others claimed she'd been a cavalry scout who vanished in a blizzard, only to rise again when the land needed a reckoning. Children whispered that her horse had wings when the moon rose right, and gamblers swore the cards always changed when her name was spoken. But old Bullard, long after his limp worsened and the canyons were sealed by time, would sit by the fire and tell it true. She weren't magic, he'd say. She was grit. Grit and sorrow, poured into a shape the desert recognized. Folks would ask her name, and he'd smile slow, nod toward the wind and say, "You already heard it, if you've been listening long enough." Then the fire would crackle, and the night would lean in, hungry for the next tale.